Welcome to SS2 Islamic Religious Studies. This lesson addresses one of the most important and sensitive contemporary issues in Islamic studies, the emergence of groups like ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and the Islamic response to terrorism. This is a topic that directly affects Muslim communities around the world and in Nigeria. ISIS, also known as ISIL, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, Daesh, its Arabic acronym, or simply the Islamic State, is a violent extremist organization that emerged from Al-Qaeda in Iraq. ISIS declared a caliphate in June 2014 when its leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi announced that he was the caliph of all Muslims from the city of Mosul in Iraq. At its peak in 2014 to 2015, ISIS controlled an area the size of the United Kingdom spanning parts of Iraq and Syria, with a population of several million people under its brutal rule. ISIS practiced extreme violence, mass executions, enslavement of Yazidi women, destruction of ancient heritage sites in Mosul and Palmyra, and public executions broadcast on social media. ISIS also inspired and carried out terrorist attacks in Western countries, in Muslim-majority countries, and in sub-Saharan Africa, including attacks inspired by or affiliated with ISIS in Nigeria, Niger, and West Africa more broadly. ISIS was militarily defeated by 2019, the coalition of US-led forces, Iraqi government forces, Syrian Democratic Forces, and others recaptured all ISIS-held territory. Baghdadi died in a US Special Forces raid in October 2019. However, ISIS continues to operate as an insurgent network and inspires attacks globally. The overwhelming response of mainstream Islamic scholarship worldwide was to condemn ISIS as un-Islamic and to provide detailed theological rebuttals. In September 2014, over 120 leading Muslim scholars from around the world signed an open letter to Baghdadi directly refuting his theological claims. The letter addressed 24 specific points including ISIS's selective reading of Quranic verses out of context, ignoring the full body of Islamic jurisprudence, the claim to caliphate being theologically invalid, classical criteria for the caliphate require broad Muslim consensus, not self-proclamation, the killing of civilians, journalists, and aid workers violating clear Quranic prohibitions, the enslavement of the Yazidis violating Islamic law which abolished the reintroduction of slavery. From abolished practices, the destruction of ancient heritage sites violating Islamic scholarship's respect for history, and the extreme takfir, declaring other Muslims apostates, being itself un-Islamic. Al-Azhar University in Cairo, the oldest and most respected Sunni institution of Islamic learning, repeatedly condemned ISIS and stated that Baghdadi had no legitimacy. Major Islamic organizations in Nigeria and West Africa, including Hezbollah and Sufi Brotherhoods, condemned ISIS and Boko Haram as having nothing to do with genuine Islamic teaching. Understanding how groups like ISIS emerged helps prevent future radicalization. Academic and Islamic scholars have identified several contributing factors: political grievances, the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 and the subsequent sectarian conflict created the conditions in which Al-Qaeda in Iraq flourished, the brutal suppression of the Syrian uprising from 2011 created a power vacuum and a population desperately seeking protection. Theological distortions. Extremist groups selectively quote religious texts, taking verses about warfare out of historical context, ignoring verses about peace and coexistence, and bypassing centuries of scholarly interpretation that constrain violence. Identity crisis. Young Muslims in diaspora communities, or in countries experiencing political upheaval, sometimes experience identity crises that extremists exploit by offering a sense of purpose and belonging. Online radicalization. ISIS was the first major terrorist group to weaponize social media, using high-quality videos, multilingual propaganda, and targeted outreach to recruit globally. Socioeconomic factors, unemployment, marginalization, and lack of opportunity create vulnerability to recruitment. Counter-radicalization, Islamic education that provides students with a full, contextualized understanding of Islam, including the Quranic verses on peace, mercy, and coexistence, is one of the most powerful tools against extremist recruitment. Nigeria faces its own experience with violent extremism in the form of Boko Haram and its faction ISWAP, Islamic State West Africa Province. Boko Haram, officially Jama'atu al-Sunnah Lidawati wa Jihad, was founded by Muhammad Yusuf in Maiduguri around 2002 and became violent after 2009. The name Boko Haram means Western education is forbidden in Hausa, reflecting the founders' opposition to Western-style schooling. The group's atrocities include kidnapping nearly 300 Chibok girls in April 2014, suicide bombings of mosques and markets, and displacement of millions from northeast Nigeria. In 2015, Boko Haram pledged allegiance to ISIS and a faction became ISWAP. Nigerian Islamic scholars, from Izola, the Tijaniya and Qadiriya Brotherhoods, the Sultan of Sokoto, and the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, have all condemned Boko Haram as violating Islamic teaching. The Sultan of Sokoto has repeatedly stated that Boko Haram is not fighting for Islam but against Islam. Islamic education, community engagement, and addressing the genuine grievances and marginalization of northeastern Nigerians are all key elements of countering this violence. Today we covered ISIS as a violent extremist organization that declared a caliphate in 2014, was defeated militarily by 2019, but continues to inspire attacks. The overwhelming mainstream Islamic response, including over 120 scholars' open letter to Baghdadi, Al-Azhar's condemnations, and all major Nigerian Islamic organizations, was theological rejection of ISIS's claims. Extremist groups exploit political grievances, theological distortions, identity crises, and online propaganda. In Nigeria, Boko Haram and ISWAP represent the local expression of this global problem. For your essay exercise, explain why the 120 Islamic scholars' open letter to Baghdadi in September 2014 concluded that his claim to be caliph of all Muslims was theologically invalid according to classical Islamic criteria.